So you be the judge of this. The other problem, of course, is government's expansionary stance since 2009. That's really where things started to go wrong. We can't keep doing that. We've been running deficits of over 3% of GDP, so our government debt has now climbed up to almost 50% of GDP. Okay, now that's not the worst numbers out there. Greece is 175% of GDP. Okay, Japan is 253% of GDP. So there are many countries, even the great Germans, now stand at 80% of GDP, government debt to GDP. Now, of course, the Germans you can excuse because they pay Greece's interest on its debt. Okay, so maybe you can forgive them for being at that level. But nonetheless, that just puts it in perspective. America stands at 100%. So it's not the worst, but it's the direction. And it's what we are spending money on. Okay. Why do we have high levels of government debt? We have high levels of government debt not because we are finishing power stations. We're spending on our power stations, but we're never finishing them. We're in year 7 of Medupi. Okay? The international norm for a 6-unit coal-fired power station is to build 5 years on it. We're in year 7. We think that we'll have unit 1 done by the end of this year, early part of next year. Remember, there's 6 units. Most people build 6 units in 5 years. We will build 1 unit in 7 years. Maybe, maybe not. We're not sure. That's what Eskom said, but they said something else the last time. So we're not sure. All right, so we win the prize for unique incompetence there, nonetheless. Okay, some gold medals that we do take. But we're not spending it on that. We're spending it really on expanding the civil service. That's what we're spending it on. So we are borrowing money to make the civil service bigger. Government's been doing 2 things. They've been employing more civil servants, and they've been paying them a very decent above-inflation wage increase. And they've been borrowing money to do that. And this is what the rating agencies have got their biggest problem with. If we were spending it on public infrastructure, on schools, on hospitals, on all of that that raises the standard of living, on roads, on ports, on railways, on power stations, and you were running a deficit of over 3% of GDP, it probably wouldn't be such a bad thing at all. Because you are increasing your ability to grow faster in the future, employ more people, create more taxpayers. We're not doing that. Look at the gap between capital expenditure by the public sector and the wage bill. This is just government's wage bill. Look at the gap. So you can see where the priority is. You can absolutely see where the priority is. So public finances have deteriorated, public policy have deteriorated. That raises the risk in this country. But public policy and public finances have a direct impact on the world we live in. Okay, it just does. The fact that we never build a power station is one of the reasons we can't grow by more than 3% per annum. And that brings us to infrastructure. We need to spend faster on infrastructure, and we need to spend more efficiently on infrastructure. You take Medupi. Medupi is essentially, what is it? It is 6 times the original budget. And it's not done yet. And they haven't added an ounce of additional kilowatt hours to the grid whatsoever. Okay. The Reserve Bank figures, based on its figures, they say with the current power capacity, we can only grow by 3.5%. Okay. We say it's less than that. We say it's 3% probably in all likelihood. So if we want to grow faster, we have to deal with this. So this has been a serious problem. And perhaps we need to relook it. Perhaps it's not just about it's not just about Eskom and putting pressure on Eskom and making sure that it functions better. Perhaps there shouldn't be something like just an Eskom. Perhaps you should open that market up completely, liberalize it, allow private players to come in. That is the best form of competition. It is just always the best form of forcing accountability. So that is part of the problem, okay? So at the moment, if you look at it, what have I got here? So your cumulative loss in GDP by now would have been 10% of GDP since 2008, okay? So our growth would have been 10% higher did we not have the electricity constraint, okay? So that really puts it in perspective. Let me just move on. Just to show you, since 2008, electricity prices have gone up 310% to finance Medupi. CapEx spend on new generation that never comes on stream has been 250 billion so far. Eskom needs another 300 billion. They're going to get it from you through taxes, and they're going to get it from you through tariffs. That's how it's going to work. Okay, so there you go. That's the amount of electricity they're producing. So we're spending and we're spending and we're spending and we're spending and we're producing less and less and less and less and less electricity. The irony is astounding. It makes no sense whatsoever. So this is one of the biggest constraints on producers and exporters, is infrastructure, especially power infrastructure. The labor environment, okay, that's another constraint. Our labor market doesn't function. Government is now considering two very positive things, and I read in the paper this morning that COSATU says no. Okay, no one knows why COSATU is saying no, but they're just saying no. The two things they are considering to bring into the labor market is the following: a continuous strike ballot. So from the point where you have, the unions have gone to their members and said, we're going to strike, the members all take a vote, they take that first ballot. So that's already there. And then they say, yes, we go on strike. But what government is saying now is that essentially if you're 3 months in, if you're 3 weeks in, you've got to force another ballot. If you're 6 weeks in, force another ballot. And that ballot has to be anonymous. The whole idea being that violence and intimidation can't be used to just perpetuate a strike for a period of 5 months. So that's not a bad idea. COSATU says no. Okay, then the other not a bad idea is what they call forced arbitration. Government will appoint an independent person through the Commission of Arbitration, and what is it called? Commission of Arbitration and something else. And? Reconciliation, yeah. So basically, they will appoint an individual, will usually be a judge, if there's a huge dispute in the industry, like the platinum mining industry, and it would be forced arbitration. That individual will listen to both parties. That individual will look at the results of both parties, individual or committee. And they will then have the power to make a binding decision on behalf of both parties, okay, in the interest of the entire economy. All right. That very good idea. Again, COSATU says no, they will fight it with everything they've got. Now, they've got substantial, you've got to agree. Lots of people can do a lot of damage. All right, so, but at least they're now starting to think along these lines. It's not a bad general idea. Now, foreign businesses find this terrible. Okay, they find this incredibly off-putting. Incredibly off-putting. Anglo selling has been an open secret for a long time. After 2012, Anglo's made it clear they don't want to do anything to do with platinum in South Africa. It's been an open secret. We've all knew it was coming. They were leaving. There's no doubt. The press we've received on this has been absolutely shocking. This is all from global newspapers. And this is probably one of the most prestigious publications out there, The Economist, and this is the headline they feature. Cry the beloved country, South Africa's sad decline. Okay? All of that feeds that perception of risk. It's risky to put your money in South Africa. It's risky. But of course, all of this will ultimately come back and affect South Africa's consumer, higher interest rates to compensate for the rising risk. And what we're seeing is, because the private sector can't expand capacity, they can't employ, so employment is static or falling, as has been the case. And what you'll probably see is that you'll have slower growth in consumer spending, slower growth in disposable income. We've already seen that. We expect that to continue. Where the consumer's income used to grow about 2%, by 4 or 5%, it's now growing by 2%, slightly below 2%. So the consumer is spending at a pace of below 2%. And that will continue unless we turn things around, unless we start to make positive interventions. At the same time, there's another risk to the consumer, and that is, of course, that interest rates go up further. Now, I've already told you we anticipate it will. Now, overall, this shows you South Africa's debt situation. You can't see it too nicely through this projector, but your overall debt burden is somewhere here in green, and it's reading off that axis, and it's around here at 74, 75%. South African consumers are therefore still very indebted, all right? But the one that the banks look at is this. This is a critical number for us. It is the interest cost to disposable income. It's reading off this axis here. The stress level in South Africa is 10%. If your interest cost to disposable income hit 10%, you can count on it. Doesn't matter which decade you look at it. You'll see consumers cut back on spending and repay their debt, and consumer spending starts to slow. All right. So this is a critical level. We're not there yet. We're heading towards 8%. 10% is a stress level. 12% is extreme stress. This is when you've got lots of bad debt. But here's the thing, though. Even though the overall economy is at 8%, and most households are still okay, especially most middle-class households, there is a segment of the South African market that is in severe stress. If they weren't in severe stress, Abel would not have made a loss of, what was it, 8 billion rand. Okay? So all of those with a lot of exposure to personal debt, and remember personal loans, short-term debt, personal loans set at a much, much higher interest rate than prime. This has worked on a margin above prime, but nowhere near personal loans. So that segment is under severe stress as we speak, and that might have consequences. The strike have aggravated it even further. So if we had to sum up, and we look at South Africa, the global environment is at least a little positive. That if we can get our act together, we can finish a power station. We can bring extra electricity on board. We can treat the private sector like an important part of this economy. They might start to expand capacity, might start to employ more people, might start to produce more, might start to export more, because at least the global environment is now supportive of them. So this is a positive. All right. However, we can also do a lot just to restore confidence in this economy. That will cost us nothing. Fix the mix in the labor market. Press ahead as government with some of these proposals. The repeated strike ballots, the forced arbitration. Press ahead with it. That's why you government. You represent everybody. You represent business, you represent labor, and you represent unemployed. Government often forgets that. They represent the unemployed. Labor legislation can't be shaped around labor unions just because it's your political partner. As the government, you are the objective party. Business, you are also the government of business. They're just as important to you. You represent everybody, including those who are not represented anywhere, the unemployed. All right. So basically, we can do a lot to do that. We can implement the NDP, which we all say we support. Constantly, government officials are saying we support the NDP. The NDP just asks for us to apply common sense. That's what it's really asking us to do. So we can do that. We can let go of these land reform proposals that are just insane. If you want to see better distribution of land, why don't you say to the farmer, I think you are valuable to this economy. I think you provide food security. I think you've done it exceptionally well with zero subsidies and virtually no support. What is it now? 2 decades, going on 2 decades. I think that I'm going to give you 5 years, 10 years to make a material difference to the distribution of land on racial grounds in South Africa. And I'm going to give you my trust, and you show me how you're going to do it. Perhaps things will be different. I don't know, but it's just a suggestion. That appears to be what successful countries have done to deal with inequality. Okay, so there's all of these sorts of things that we can make a difference. The biggest thing we can do to make a difference is just finish a power station. I mean, how hard can it be? If we need to fire everybody and bring the Chinese in, then let's do it. Okay, but just finish a power station, just one. And we will make a difference. So we can still lift our growth rate. So what do we think? This year's over. The first quarter has been ravished by strikes. The second quarter has been destroyed by strikes. July in the third quarter was also affected by strikes. So this year, really, all we've got left is August, September, October, November, December to stage a recovery. That's not long enough. This year is probably going to be weaker than last year. Last year we grew by 1.9%. This year our growth could be anything between 1.3 to 1.8%. We're saying 1.8%, but we're assuming a lot of things to happen from August onwards that might not come together, if you know what I mean. So it could be 1.3%. The rand is very dependent. We have to deal with the risk. So there is this fear when the rating agencies come together in October that we could see a very vulnerable currency. If the rand survives October, thereafter, it will probably be steady until US interest rates go up. The interest rate cycle, again, depends on the rand. And we believe that you will see further interest rate increases. So what does that all sum up to? It sums up to this. This year, 1.8% could be 1.3, like I say. And then it starts to improve. Over here, we assume a power station is done. Right? We're saying even if you're a tortoise, at some point or the other, you cross the line. Okay, it has to. Just have to. Keep moving in one line, then at some point, you have to. So then we think that growth of over 3% then becomes likely. Are you with me? Throughout this period, though, as the world economy starts to recover, we start to do better on the export front, as you can see there. And our base starts, our current account deficits start to shrink, but it's still big, still well over 3%. For us to do better there, we need to deal with labor issues. We need to make it more attractive for private companies to employ people, to expand capacity. We need to stop with these economic policies, which is really just suggesting very interventionist, very reckless state. Okay, and then of course interest rates go up over the period, and then throughout this period you can see the rand is actually quite weak. There's a bit of a pull back in the first half of 2015. Then second half 2016, the rand starts to come under pressure. And then, of course, early part of 2016, the rand now in the first half is under acute pressure. Okay, so that puts it into some perspective. And that's my story. I know it's long, but it is a huge amount of things we're doing all the time. Okay, thanks.